I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were all there, the awkward silences, the hushed conversations that stopped the moment I walked into the room, the way my mother, Linda, avoided eye contact whenever I mentioned Christmas plans. But like a fool, I chalked it up to holiday stress. It wasn't until my Aunt Paula called me 2 weeks before Christmas that the truth smacked me in the face. "They're going without you, Michelle," she said, her voice hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how I'd take it. I blinked. "What?" "They've booked a trip to that fancy resort, you know, the one you were excited about? Linda, Henry, Charles, Riley, and even their kid. But not you." I sat there, gripping my phone like it might slip from my hand. I had spent months helping my parents renovate their new restaurant. I worked late nights after my shifts, poured in my own savings, and made sure every detail was perfect. All for them. And now, they were celebrating the holidays without me? "And they told you not to say anything?" I asked, my voice hollow. Aunt Paula sighed. "They called me last night. Your mother said, 'Let that selfish girl celebrate alone.'" Selfish. Me. The word rattled around in my head like a cruel joke. I was the one who had funded their dream restaurant, the one who spent my weekends covered in paint and dust, the one who gave without asking for anything in return. And yet, I was the selfish one? I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks for telling me, Aunt Paula. What are you going to do?" she asked gently. I didn't answer right away. What could I do? Demand an invitation? Beg them to include me? No. If that was how they felt, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I'd play along. I'd let them smile in my face. Let them send me fake holiday wishes. Let them think they got away with it. And when they walked out of my life, I wouldn't stop them. But they had no idea what was coming. I didn't say a word. Not when my mother Linda cheerfully asked me to help pick out new tableware for the restaurant, pretending like she hadn't just cut me out of Christmas. Not when my father Henry smiled at me over dinner, as if he hadn't let my mother do all the talking for both of them. And definitely not when my brother Charles told me, in his usual oblivious way, how excited he was for the trip. I just smiled, nodded, played along. Then 2 days before Christmas, they left for the resort. No goodbyes, no last-minute explanations, just silence. I stayed back, alone except for Aunt Paula, who refused to let me spend the holidays by myself. She invited me over, and for the first time in a long while, I had a real Christmas. No fake smiles, no pretending, just two people, a home-cooked meal, and a good bottle of whiskey. And then the photos started rolling in. My parents, lounging on the beach with cocktails in hand. Charles and Riley, smiling in front of their suite. Even their kid, building sand castles on the shore. They had no idea Aunt Paula was with me. They had no clue I was looking at every single picture they sent her, each one more ridiculous than the last. Paula chuckled, shaking her head. "They really think they pulled one over on you, don't they?" I smirked, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "They always do. But when they got back, something changed. At first, I thought ignoring them would be easy. They had made their choice. I could make mine. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Linda, ever the strategist, sent me a casual text. "Hope you had a great Christmas." I ignored it. Then Henry called, straight to voicemail. Then Charles's wife, Riley, reached out. Now, that was unexpected. Riley and I were never particularly close, but something told me to answer. The moment I did, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I wanted you to know," she said, lowering her voice. I didn't agree with what they did. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean, the trip? Leaving you out? That wasn't my choice." For the first time in days, I felt something shift. I had assumed everyone was in on it, that they had all agreed I wasn't worth including. But Riley? She had actually argued about it, and according to her, things got a whole lot worse after they arrived. "What happened?" I asked. She sighed. "You really don't know the half of it." I gripped my phone tighter. Riley's voice was quiet, hesitant, like she was debating whether to tell me the whole truth. "Riley," I said, my patience thinning. "What happened?" She exhaled sharply. "The trip was a disaster, Michelle." I leaned forward. "How so?" "The first night we got there, Linda and Charles got drunk at the hotel bar. At first, it was just normal, lighthearted stuff, complaining about work, laughing about old memories. But then," Riley hesitated. "But then what?" Your mother started ranting about you. I clenched my jaw, already expecting the worst. She went on and on about how you weren't too involved in their lives, how you made them feel guilty for taking the trip, how they were finally getting a break from you. Riley's voice was laced with discomfort. And then she said something that really stuck with me. She admitted they let you pay for the restaurant renovations because they knew you'd expect something in return. She actually laughed about it, like it was some kind of joke. I froze. I shouldn't have been surprised. I shouldn't have felt surprised, but something about hearing it so plainly, so casually, like my sacrifices were nothing more than an inconvenience they had to tolerate, made my stomach churn. They knew I was hoping to spend the holidays with them, I muttered, and they still took my money, still let me spend every weekend helping them, and then just cut me out. Riley was silent for a moment. I almost walked out right then, she admitted, but when I confronted Charles about it the next morning, he brushed it off, said it was just how they are. That sounded about right. My brother had always been a follower, going along with whatever our parents wanted, never questioning anything. But Riley wasn't done. Then things got worse, she said, her voice dropping. Your dad tried to act like nothing happened, but your mom was pissed. Apparently, Charles told her I was upset about what she said, and she completely turned on me. She started ranting about how I should be grateful, how I don't contribute enough to the family, how I don't help out the way you do. I blinked. Wait, what? She actually used you as an example, Riley said, laughing bitterly. She went on about how you gave them everything without asking for anything back. And because I wasn't willing to do the same, I was the selfish one. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. So let me get this straight first. They called me selfish for expecting a little basic decency. But then when it came to you, suddenly I'm the perfect daughter? Exactly. My head was spinning. It was so on brand for Linda and Henry to manipulate a situation to suit their narrative. They had spent years guilting me into helping them, making me feel like I was lucky to be part of their lives, only to discard me the moment I became inconvenient. And now, they were using that same loyalty to make Riley feel small. That's not even the worst part, she added. My stomach dropped. What else happened? Riley took a deep breath. I told Charles that what his mother said about you was disgusting. He told me to drop it. Said his parents deserved a vacation with no strings attached. I told him that's not what this was about, that it wasn't just the trip, it was the way they did it. But he wouldn't listen. I could picture it perfectly. Charles, standing there with that same blank expression he always had when things got tense, refusing to take a side, refusing to think for himself. And then I told him I wanted to call you when we got back, she continued. I sat up straighter. And? He freaked out. She let out a hollow laugh. He accused me of stirring up drama. Said that if I told you everything, you'd just use it as an excuse to make them look bad. I gritted my teeth. They didn't need my help to look bad. They were doing just fine on their own. But you still called me, I pointed out. Yeah. Riley hesitated. Because, Michelle, I don't think I can do this anymore. I blinked. Do what? This family. Her voice cracked. I can't keep pretending this is normal. I can't keep watching them treat you like garbage while Charles just stands there. Something in my chest tightened. Riley and Charles had been married for 5 years. They had a child together. And now, she was seriously considering walking away. I swallowed hard. Are you saying, I don't know, she admitted. I just know that I can't unsee this now. And I don't want our son growing up thinking this is okay. I stared down at my hands. I had spent years being the outsider in my own family, watching as Linda and Henry twisted every situation to make themselves the victims, while Charles played the obedient son. And now, for the first time, someone else was seeing it too. I don't blame you, I finally said. Riley let out a shaky breath. I thought the worst part of this trip would be what they did to you. But Michelle, that was just the beginning. Everything is about to fall apart. I frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she should say it. Then she just let it all out. The last night we were there, I caught Charles talking to Greg. I stiffened. Greg, the man Charles had become way too close with over the past few months. A man who was bad news from the moment he showed up. Riley's voice dropped to a whisper. He was telling Greg that understood why he did what he did, that maybe you had it coming. My blood ran cold. Had what coming? Riley's voice was tight. I don't know what they meant, but whatever it is, it's not over. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Riley, I said slowly, my voice colder than I intended. What do you mean, not over? What exactly did Charles say? There was a pause on the other end. Then a deep sigh. I don't know everything, Michelle, but I know enough to tell you this: whatever Greg and Charles were talking about, it wasn't just about the trip, it was about you. I swallowed, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. Greg, I had never trusted that man. He had come into Charles's life like a parasite, a drinking buddy who never seemed to have a real job, always borrowing money, always looking for an angle. And now, somehow, he had wormed his way so deep into my brother's head that they were talking about me behind my back, and not in a way that felt harmless. What did Greg even have to do with any of this? I asked. Another pause. Then Riley's voice dropped into something barely above a whisper. I think Greg wants something from you. A chill ran down my spine. Like what? I don't know, but when I heard them talking, Charles sounded nervous, like he didn't fully agree with whatever Greg was saying, but he wasn't pushing back either. She hesitated. Greg was telling him that you owed them for everything your parents had done for you, that if you didn't want to be part of the family, then maybe it was time to settle up and walk away for good. I felt a slow, burning anger rise in my chest. Settle up? I repeated. Are you kidding me? I had given my parents everything, my time, my labor, my money, and now they were acting like I owed them, like I had some kind of debt to pay? Riley sighed. Michelle, I don't know what they meant by that, but it sounded bad. Like they were planning something. And I don't think it's just about cutting you off. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I could feel something shifting, something slipping out of my control. And then Riley said something that made my blood run cold. Michelle, she said softly, I think they're coming after the restaurant. I froze. What? Your parents? The way Greg was talking, it sounded like they're trying to push you out for good. Maybe even take legal action to make sure you don't have a claim to anything. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Legal action? On what grounds? I funded the damn place. I know, Riley said, but Greg is a snake. And your parents? They'll do whatever it takes to make sure they come out on top. I wouldn't put it past them to try something shady. A slow realization settled over me. They weren't just done with me emotionally. They wanted me gone completely. I stood up, pacing the length of my apartment. My mind was spinning, 1,000 possibilities running through my head. If they wanted to push me out legally, what could they do? Try to change ownership records? Claim I had made the money a gift instead of an investment? It didn't matter that I had receipts, contracts. If they were desperate enough, they'd find a way to make my life hell. I had been too quiet, too patient, too nice, but not anymore. You still there? Riley asked. I stopped pacing. Yeah, I said, voice steady. I need to make a few calls. The first person I called was Aunt Paula. They're what? She snapped as soon as I finished explaining. Apparently, Greg has my parents convinced that I'll owe them something, I said bitterly, and now they're trying to cut me out of everything completely. Aunt Paula swore under her breath. Michelle, listen to me. You need to protect yourself. If they're thinking about pulling something shady, you can't just sit back and let them do it. I won't, I said. I just need to figure out my next move. Paula was silent for a moment, then her voice turned sharp. Get ahead of them. I frowned. What do you mean? Go public, she said. If they're planning something underhanded, don't let them control the narrative. Get the truth out first. Make it impossible for them to twist things in their favor. A slow, knowing smile spread across my face. That's not a bad idea, I murmured. My parents thrived on controlling the story, on making themselves look like the victims while everyone else was the problem. But what if I took that power away? What if I made sure everyone knew what they had done? And that's exactly what I did. I spent the next day gathering everything: texts, emails, bank statements, proving that I had funded the restaurant renovations, every single receipt, every single transaction. And then I wrote it all out. I didn't make it a sob story. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just laid out the facts that my parents had manipulated me, used me for my money, and then abandoned me when I was no longer useful to them, that they were now trying to erase me completely. And then I posted it. I sent it to everyone: family, mutual friends, even a few local business owners who had connections to my parents. And I waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. I got a furious call from my mother first. What the hell do you think you're doing? She screeched the moment I picked up. Setting the record straight, I said coolly. You are ruining us, Linda spat. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? I smirked. I think it makes you look exactly how you are. She let out a frustrated, furious noise. You selfish, ungrateful little. I hung up. Next came my father, then Charles. Both ignored, then Greg. I didn't answer his call, but he left a voicemail that was pure rage. You think you're smart? He snarled. You have no idea who you're messing with. I just laughed, because I was smart, and this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The moment I hung up on Greg, I knew there was no going back. I had exposed my parents for who they really were, aired out every ugly truth they tried to keep hidden, and now they were scrambling. I could already picture Linda pacing in the kitchen, her face twisted in anger, Henry rubbing his temples while Charles fumed in the background, blaming me for everything. Good, I wasn't done yet. 2 days later, the real chaos started. Aunt Paula called me first. Michelle, you are not going to believe this. I leaned back against my couch, a smirk already forming. Try me. Your parents are spiraling. Apparently, some of their business partners caught wind of what you posted. People are talking, Michelle. They're losing credibility fast. I let out a satisfied hum. My parents prided themselves on their image, on appearing like the perfect small business owners, pillars of the community. But now, the whispers were starting. People who had once respected them were beginning to question them. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. They called me, Paula continued, tried to get me to talk to you, to fix this mess. I scoffed. And what did you say? She laughed. Told them to fix it themselves, since they're so good at lying their way out of things. I grinned. I love you, Paula. But that wasn't even the best part. That night, Riley called. Her voice was tight, nervous. Michelle, the first thing Charles is about to snap. I frowned. What do you mean? He came home drunk, she whispered. Slammed the door. Started ranting about how you ruined his life. He kept saying that everything was fine before you got involved, that you turned people against him. And then, she hesitated. And then what? He said Greg had a plan to shut you up. My breath caught. He was too drunk to make sense. But Michelle, he sounded serious. Like Greg has something planned, and Charles is just going along with it. I clenched my jaw. So, Greg wanted to play dirty? Fine. I was done waiting for them to make a move. It was time to end this. The next morning I made a call to the one person Greg would never see coming, his ex-wife. Tanya had left Greg years ago, but from what I had heard, she still harbored enough resentment to burn his entire life to the ground if given the chance. And lucky for me, she hated my parents almost as much as I did. When I explained everything, how Greg was working with my family to push me out, how he was manipulating Charles, how he was likely planning something shady, Tanya didn't hesitate. Oh, he's definitely planning something, she said, her voice dripping with amusement. That man is incapable of not screwing people over. Do you know what it is? Not yet, she admitted, but I can find out. It didn't take long. That night, Tanya called me back. Got something for you. I gripped my phone. Tell me. Greg's been talking to a lawyer, she said. Trying to convince your parents to take legal action against you, claim you gifted them the money for the restaurant, so you have no financial claim to it. I exhaled sharply. I knew it. But here's where it gets messy, Tanya continued. Greg's been telling them they can sue you for defamation because of your post. He's convinced them that if they hit you with a lawsuit, you'll back down. I smirked. They really don't know me at all, do they? Tanya chuckled. Nope. And here's the kicker, Greg's broke. I mean, really broke. I wouldn't be surprised if he's only doing this to milk money out of them. It was almost too perfect. Greg wasn't just manipulating my parents, he was using them. And once he drained them dry, he'd move on to his next victims. I could use that. The next day, I sent my mother a text. Go ahead. Try to sue me. Just know that I have every transaction documented, every receipt saved, and multiple witnesses who will happily testify that the money I gave you was an investment, not a gift. And if Greg is advising you, you might want to reconsider, because I know a lot more about his financial situation than he wants you to. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Linda. I let it go to voicemail. Then Henry. Then Charles. The first ignored them all. Then Greg tried calling. That one? I answered. You think you're clever? He snarled the second I picked up. I smiled. I don't think. I know. Greg let out a humorless laugh. You're making a mistake. No, I said calmly. You did when you thought you could manipulate me the way you manipulate everyone else. A long silence. Then, you'll regret this, I smirked. doubt it. And I hung up. A week passed, then another, and then the inevitable happened. My parents turned on Greg. Once they realized he had no real legal standing, once they saw that his promises were empty, they cut him off just like they had done to me. But Greg wasn't like me. He wasn't going to take the betrayal with quiet dignity. No, Greg burned everything on his way out. It started small rumors about Henry's shady business dealings, whispers about Linda's questionable bookkeeping practices. But then he went for the kill. One morning, Aunt Paula sent me a message. Check the news. I opened the link, and there it was. An article exposing financial fraud within my parents' business, tax evasion, under-the-table transactions, even worker mistreatment. Greg had spilled everything, and just like that, it was over. Their restaurant, the very thing they betrayed me for, was finished. Their reputation, destroyed. And me? I was free. A month later, Riley called me. Charles is miserable, she said. He still blames you for everything, even though Greg was the one who sold them out. I let out a laugh. Sounds about right. And Michelle? She hesitated. I left him. I sat up. You did? Yeah. Her voice was steady. I realized I don't want to be part of that family anymore. I don't want my son growing up thinking that kind of manipulation is normal. I smiled. Good for you, Riley. Thanks. A pause. Then, I hope you know, you didn't lose a family. You just got rid of the wrong people. I swallowed hard, because she was right. My parents had made their choice. So had I. And for the first time in my life, I didn't regret it. Story 2. When I first met Ethan, he was just another barista struggling to make ends meet. I was 22, still in college, and working part-time at the same Starbucks to save enough money to finally move out of my parents' house. Ethan, who was 30, had already graduated, but he was drowning in student loan debt, thanks to his parents' gambling problems. Unlike most of our coworkers, we actually enjoyed each other's company beyond casual small talk. At first, we bonded over our dysfunctional families, but over time, our connection deepened into something real, or so I thought. After 2 years, I had finally saved enough to rent my own place. Ethan, however, was still stuck at his parents' house, unable to afford his own apartment. I didn't think twice when I offered to let him move in with me. He hesitated at first, admitting that he couldn't afford to split the rent equally, but I assured him it was fine. I agreed to cover 80% while he pitched in 20%. Plus, we'd split the utilities. In hindsight, that was my first mistake. At first, things were okay. I worked a corporate job with a flexible schedule, while Ethan's job required him to be on site for long hours. Because of that, I handled most of the household chores, cooking, laundry, cleaning, and dishes. The only thing I asked him to do was take out the trash. Simple, right? Apparently not. Every morning, I'd wake up to find the trash still sitting there, untouched. I reminded him over and over again, but he always had the same excuse. I forgot. At first, I brushed it off. I knew he was tired from work, and I didn't want to nag him, but then things got worse. One weekend, I had to work late, and when I got home, the apartment was a disaster zone. The sink overflowed with dirty dishes. Empty snack wrappers were scattered across the counter, and laundry was piled up in the corner. I was exhausted from my shift, but there was no way I could relax in that mess. So, I spent the next 2 hours cleaning. When Ethan finally got home, I expected at least some acknowledgement of my effort. Instead, he just plopped down on the couch, turned on the TV, and cracked open a beer like nothing had happened. That was the first time I snapped. I asked him calmly at first why he never took out the trash. His response? A shrug. Look, I work hard. I deserve to relax when I get home. You should understand that, he said. I stared at him in disbelief. And what do you think I do all day? My job is just as demanding as yours. And yet I still come home and clean up after both of us. Ethan rolled his eyes. No one asked you to do that. That hit me harder than I expected, because he was right. He never asked me to take care of everything. But shouldn't a decent partner at least appreciate the effort? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Then, from now on, I won't, I told him. You're on your own. You cook your own meals, do your own laundry, and clean up after yourself. He scoffed like he didn't believe me. But I kept my word. For the next few weeks, I watched as he scrambled to iron his shirts before work, ate takeout because he couldn't be bothered to cook, and lived in a pile of his own filth because he refused to clean. Meanwhile, I made sure to only take care of my own needs. Then came the rent. I paid my half and told the landlord that Ethan would be responsible for his share. When he found out, he flipped out. You always paid 80% before. Why change now? I crossed my arms. Because I was doing that out of kindness, and you never appreciated it, he argued. He sulked, He tried to guilt trip me, but in the end, he had no choice but to pay up, and still no apology. Not once did he acknowledge how unfair he had been or how much I had done for him. By then, our relationship was crumbling. Our arguments became a daily routine, and I could tell he was growing resentful. But the final blow came after I got promoted at work. I didn't even tell him one of our mutual friends did. And that night, Ethan came home drunk, shaking me awake in the middle of the night. "I need to talk to you," he slurred. I groaned, rubbing my eyes. "Can it wait until morning?" "No," he insisted. "It's important." Annoyed, I sat up and waited for him to get to the point. That's when he dropped a bombshell. "I met someone else," he said, his words heavy with drunken confidence. "Bella. She's 24, smart, beautiful, rich." Ah, there it was. I knew of Bella. She worked at his company, the daughter of some industrialist who had a job only because her father insisted she needed work experience. And suddenly, everything made sense. Ethan kept talking, rambling about how she was a real woman who didn't care about careers and just wanted to settle down. He said he was falling in love with her. I expected to feel devastated, angry, betrayed. But honestly, I just felt relieved. I looked him in the eye and said, "That's great. I'm happy for you." He blinked. "What?" "I mean it," I said. "Now I don't have to feel guilty about breaking up with you." His face twisted in shock. "Wait, what? You're breaking up with me?" "Of course," I replied. "We're done, Ethan. You can pack your things and move out as soon as possible." At first, he tried to act smug about it, telling me I'd regret letting Errol Mann go. But when he realized I was serious, his entire demeanor shifted. He accused me of being jealous, of flaunting my promotion in his face, of not understanding what men really want. I just laughed. "Ethan, I stopped caring months ago. Bella is welcome to you." And that was that. The breakup should have been simple. But Ethan wasn't done. A week later, as he packed his things, he had the audacity to bring Bella over to my apartment, which I was still paying rent for. I walked in to find them sitting on my couch, acting like they owned the place. Bella looked me up and down, her expression filled with contempt, and I had no idea why. But I didn't engage. I had bigger things to focus on, like reclaiming my life. That night, as I went upstairs, I overheard them talking. Bella giggled. "You really downgraded before me, huh?" Ethan laughed. "She was just useful. She paid for everything, and I let her think she was independent. Honestly, she was kind of pathetic." I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my stomach twisting. So that's what he thought of me all along. As much as it stung, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. No, if Ethan wanted to play games, I'd make sure I had the last move. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself, because now, I had a plan. I spent the next few weeks adjusting to life without Ethan, and honestly, it was amazing. No more cleaning up after a man who treated me like a maid. No more dealing with his entitled attitude. No more feeling like I was carrying the weight of the entire relationship. The apartment finally felt like mine, and I was loving every second of it. Then, 2 months later, something completely unexpected happened. I came home from work, grabbed my mail, and there it was, a wedding invitation from Ethan and Bella. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe he forgot to update his guest list. Maybe it was sent automatically. But when I opened the envelope, I saw a handwritten note in the corner. "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Bella." I stared at it for a solid minute, my mind racing. Was this real? Ethan, who I had financially supported, who I had cleaned up after, who I had given everything to, was now throwing his better life in my face. He actually wanted me to come just so he could gloat? That's when the anger hit me. I had spent years being the supportive girlfriend, years working my ass off while he coasted, years believing we were a team when, in reality, I was just his stepping stone. And now, after all that, he wanted me to sit there and watch him marry the woman he cheated on me with? No, absolutely not. I wasn't just going to ignore this. I was going to RSVP, yes, and I was bringing the perfect +1. I stayed up late that night doing some research. I scrolled through Bella's social media, looking for anything that might be useful. And then, jackpot, I found him, Jake, Bella's ex-boyfriend. From what I could tell, they had been together for years, high school sweethearts even. But they broke up about 6 months ago, which was right around the time Ethan started seeing Bella. I kept scrolling through old posts, piecing the timeline together, and that's when I realized something huge. Bella cheated on Jake. With Ethan, I didn't waste any time. I sent Jake a friend request. To my surprise, he accepted within minutes. Me, hey, this is totally random, but I think we have something in common. Jake, Ethan and Bella? I grinned. This was going to be easier than I thought. We started talking, and sure enough, he had a lot to say. Apparently, Bella had been stringing him along while she was messing around with Ethan. When Jake found out, she tried to spin it like he was the problem, that he was too clingy and didn't understand her needs. Meanwhile, Ethan had been in her ear, telling her she deserved someone better. Jake was still bitter about it, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. So, after venting about our mutual exes for a bit, I went in for the kill. So, I got this wedding invitation. Want to crash it with me? There was a pause. Then, Jake, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. The day of the wedding arrived, and I made sure to dress to kill. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I wasn't going to flip tables or scream at anyone. No, my revenge was going to be much more subtle. I just wanted to remind Ethan that I was not the pathetic, useful girl he thought I was. Jake picked me up, looking sharp as hell in his suit. When we walked into the venue together, all eyes turned toward us, including Ethan's. His jaw literally dropped. I watched as he processed the sight of me, hair done, makeup flawless, wearing a dress that hugged all the right places. And then his eyes landed on Jake, and oh boy, he went rigid, his hands clenched into fists. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. I gave him a sweet, innocent smile and walked right past him to find my seat. He stormed up to me almost immediately, his voice a harsh whisper. "What the hell are you doing here with him?" I tilted my head. "You invited me, remember?" He glanced at Jake, then back at me, his face turning red. "You know exactly what I mean." I just shrugged. "I thought it'd be nice to have some company." Ethan clenched his jaw, but he couldn't make a scene. Not with all his guests watching. So he had no choice but to walk back to the altar and pretend everything was fine. I could see it in his face though. He was seething, and it only got better from there. When Bella finally walked down the aisle, she was glowing until she saw Jake. She froze. Her expression flickered between shock, panic, and something else, guilt. She looked at Ethan, then back at Jake, then at me, as if trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Jake gave her a polite nod. Bella turned pale, but she kept walking. She had no other choice. The ceremony went on, but I could tell she was distracted. She kept sneaking glances at Jake, her fingers twitching like she wanted to reach out to him. Ethan, oblivious, just kept smiling like he had already won. Oh, buddy, you have no idea. At the reception, things really took a turn. Bella still hadn't said a word to Jake, but I could feel the tension. And then, finally, she cracked. She walked right up to our table, staring at Jake like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Jake, to his credit, stayed perfectly calm. I was invited. Her eyes snapped to me. By her? I sipped my champagne and smiled. Yup. Bella's face went from confused to furious in an instant. She turned back to Jake. "Are you two together now?" Jake raised an eyebrow. And if we were? She had no answer for that. Instead, she grabbed his wrist and yanked him toward the exit. I could see them arguing, Bella's hands flailing as she tried to explain herself. Ethan was watching the whole thing from across the room, his expression shifting from smug to concerned. Then suddenly Bella ran, straight out of the reception hall. A hush fell over the crowd, people whispered. Bella's parents looked mortified. A bridesmaid ran to grab a note that Bella had left on her table and hesitantly read it aloud. Bella had written that she couldn't go through with the wedding. That seeing Jake again had made her realize she was making a mistake, that she still loved him. Ethan, absolutely wrecked. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the times he had used me, all the times he had belittled me, and I just sat back, sipping my drink, as his entire perfect life fell apart in front of everyone. I didn't say a word to him as I walked out of that venue with Jake by my side. I didn't need to, because Ethan had invited me to his wedding to show off, and instead, he got publicly humiliated in the worst way possible. The drive home from the wedding was surreal. Jake and I didn't say much at first. There was this weird, electric silence between us, like neither of us could quite believe what had just happened. Eventually, he let out a low whistle. Well, that was Something, I snorted. Yeah, not exactly what I had in mind when I invited you. Not gonna lie, he said, shaking his head. I thought we were just going to make them uncomfortable for a few hours. Didn't expect Bella to actually run away from her own wedding. Same, I admitted. I mean, yeah, I wanted to get under Ethan's skin, but I never thought she'd drop everything for me, Jake finished, giving me a sideways glance. I bit my lip. Yeah, did you? Jake was quiet for a moment, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. I always knew she had unresolved feelings for me, he admitted, but I didn't think she'd actually do anything about it. I nodded slowly. That made sense. So, I said, watching him carefully. What now? Jake sighed. No clue, but I'm definitely not jumping back into anything with her. Not after everything. That was all I needed to hear. We parted ways that night, promising to keep in touch. But I already knew we wouldn't. Jake had gotten his closure. I had gotten my revenge. And Bella? Well, she had some soul searching to do. But Ethan wasn't done with me. I woke up the next morning to 6 missed calls and a dozen texts, all from Ethan. I didn't even bother reading them at first. I already knew what they'd say. He was going to blame me for everything, even though Bella was a grown woman who made her own choices. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I scrolled through the messages. Ethan, you ruined my life. Ethan, I hope you're happy. Ethan, what kind of sick person brings someone's ex to their wedding? Ethan, I worked so hard for this. Do you even realize what you did? Ethan, Bella's parents are pissed. They're cutting her off. I blinked at that last one. Oh, so Bella's family wasn't just mad that she ran away, they were actually cutting her off financially. That explained why Ethan was freaking out so much. He hadn't just lost his bride, he'd lost the cushy, effortless life he had been planning for himself. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, but Ethan wasn't the type to let things go. By noon, he was banging on my door. I groaned, running a hand down my face. I should have expected this. At first, I considered ignoring him, but the banging didn't stop. If I let this go on, my neighbors were going to call the cops. So, with a deep breath, I cracked open the door just enough to look at him. You have 30 seconds, I said flatly. Ethan's eyes were wild. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. This is your fault, he spat. You ruined everything. I rolled my eyes. I didn't do anything, Ethan. Bella left because she wanted to. That's not on me. She wouldn't have left if you hadn't brought Jake, he snapped. I let out a sharp laugh. So what? She was so in love with you that simply seeing her ex made her run away? That's not a me problem. That's a you problem. Ethan's face turned red. You were always jealous, he hissed. You couldn't stand that I was moving up in life while you stayed the same. That made me laugh even harder. Moving up in life? You were leeching off Bella the same way you leeched off me. He flinched at that, but I wasn't done. You know what, Ethan? This whole thing just proved that you never actually cared about her. You just cared about what she could give you. And now that she's not daddy's little princess anymore, I'm guessing she's not so appealing, huh? His mouth opened and closed like a fish. He knew I was right, but he was too stubborn to admit it. Instead, he switched tactics. You should feel bad for what you did, he said, trying to sound wounded. I have nothing now. I quit my job because I thought I wouldn't need it anymore. I don't even have a place to stay. I stared at him, stunned. Wait, you quit your job? Ethan's jaw tightened. I was supposed to move into her house. I blinked. Her house? The one her father bought for her? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Oh. This man had literally quit his job and was banking on Bella supporting him for the rest of his life. And now, without her family's money, he had nothing. I almost felt bad for him. But then I remembered everything he had put me through, and suddenly I didn't feel bad at all. I shook my head. That's not my problem, Ethan. You made your choices. Now deal with them. He took a step forward like he was going to argue, but I held up my phone. Leave, now, or I'm calling the cops. He hesitated, glaring at me, but in the end he turned and stomped away. I watched him go, finally feeling at peace. A few weeks later, Jake reached out to me. He wanted to meet up, and to my surprise, he wasn't alone. Bella was with him. I braced myself, half expecting some kind of confrontation, but when I arrived at the cafe, she smiled at me. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I raised an eyebrow. For what? For everything, she admitted. For how I treated you that night at your apartment. For looking down on you. For listening to Ethan's lies. I didn't say anything, so she kept going. I don't know what I was thinking, she said, shaking her head. I let him manipulate me the same way he manipulated you. And when I saw Jake again at the wedding, She swallowed hard. I realized I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Jake put an arm around her, and for the first time, I actually believed that they were happy together. I exhaled slowly, letting her words sink in. I didn't need her apology, but it was nice to hear, so I nodded. "Thanks for saying that," she smiled. "And thanks for, inviting Jake." We all laughed at that, and for the first time in months, I felt light. After that, I didn't talk to Jake or Bella much. They had their own lives to live, and I had mine. As for Ethan, last I heard, he was couch surfing at a friend's place, still trying to figure out his next move. I don't know if he ever learned his lesson, but me, I thrived. Because in the end, Ethan wanted me at his wedding to rub his perfect life in my face. Instead, he watched it burn to the ground.